Greetings, Mark Grang here, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, and today my guests are John Eastman, Conway Town Manager and Deputy Town Manager and Engineer and whatever other titles you have. Paul D. Welcome.
Chief Cook and Bottle Washer.
Yeah, welcome guys.
Thank you.
Hey, so we're gonna. This is gonna be Paul's last town meeting or last vote. I mean, the last a little bit of town. So at the end of this, after we get through all the dry stuff with the Warren article, maybe we'll Paul will share a story or two of his highlights of 25. How long have you been here?
33.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Topical news. What's going on with the Saco River covered bridge? Is the state going to take that over? I mean, is the state going to restrict it to pedestrian?
No. So we had some interest from some of the neighbors that live on East Side Road about overweighted trucks, and at the selectmen's meeting this past week, we put it on the agenda for the selectmen to hear the citizens, and we had Chief Matty there. I had also consulted with Chief Purley up in Jackson. As you know, Jackson has all kinds of issues, a lot more damaging. I asked Chief Purley how he was able to successfully catch people, and he said that they have neighbors that take a lot of pictures. And
they run into the bridge. That's
and
how
they
you
run
catch
into
them.
the bridge. I think that, keep in mind, and Paul is the engineer, he can jump in, but the bridge, it's rated for 3 ton, but when it was, before they made it, 1 car only, there used to be, multiple cars going north and south through there, and sometimes if you think about Freiburg Fair or in the summer, 4th of July, there would be 8, 9, 10 cars on that bridge, waiting to come through as the traffic is moving towards, up Washington Street or going north on East Side Road. So I don't think, we did hear from citizens yesterday. I don't think that is a
So what was the initial, how did this even start? Oh, because of the neighbors.
The neighbors.
Okay.
They had witnessed multiple vehicles come across that, and they have concern, and rightly so. But from talking with Chief Matty, the one thing I could say, I think their issue is valid, but we can't remember, there's been very, very few reported accidents with the bridge.
So the neighbors worry about accidents or just speeders?
Not speeders. One of the neighbors was able to petition the state DOT for the speed limit to go from 40 down to 35.
Right, so is this a state decision or town decision? And so bottom line, what's going to happen?
There's no decision. You heard the abutters who would like to see additional changes. Right? They lobbied for years to get the speed limit reduced, and they did that. The person who was very vocal was Roger Lemieux, right? Who has rental property there,
right.
Vacation property, and he.
So I'm just going to move this along here a little bit, Paul. But sorry. So the selectmen are going to decide on this or no?
No. I think they're just going to take it under advisement. Chief Matty is going to up their patrols and try to monitor it a little bit more, and then.
But monitor it for what?
For oversized vehicles being on the bridge.
I see.
One last thing. The difficult thing is 3 tons is 6,000 pounds, but a cruiser, a Conway police cruiser, is 6,500 pounds. So that would be considered over.
So is that, Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off, but is that really a problem with that bridge?
No, not at all. The bridge is much stronger than that, but the posting is for the GVWR gross vehicle weight rating, and it's a 3-ton rating. So that means you couldn't put 3 tons in your personal automobile, but you could in a Ford 250, right? So what they're trying to do is limit that type of commercial.
What do you think would could hold? When something's rated 3 tons, it probably could hold 10 tons.
No, once again, that's not the rating of the bridge. That is the posting for the legal vehicle. They don't want a vehicle that has a capacity exceeding that.
How much do you think that bridge can hold?
Gosh, off the top of my head, in terms of pounds. Well, as John said, we've seen 8 vehicles on there at a time, right? So these, we had previously done a rating for our covered bridge, which is West Side Road, and you know, we've
you mean the Swift River
Swift River
Bridge?
Bridge.
Swift River Bridge,
Right,
which is
but
closed to
that's-
vehicle
yeah,
traffic,
okay,
right?
right.
But people want to rent it. They want to get married on the bridge, you know. So
And
we
they
have
don't have
100
100 people.
We
You
have a
don't-
100-person limit on there.
Because
But
of
it-
the weight?
No, because of the size, how much 100 people, because of the parking, where do you put 100, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all different reasons for the limitations that have nothing to do with the structural ability of the structure, which, you know, that as I've said, we've had upwards of 8 vehicles on these bridges, right?
Well, I always thought people wanted to get married on a Swift River Bridge so the groom could just jump off at the last minute.
Well, who
Or
knows?
or the bride.
Who knows people's
All right, so
intentions.
bridge is safe, right? I mean, the
Yes.
selectmen, okay.
Yeah.
All righty, good. And the bridge, I know Swift River was reconstructed like 30 years ago now, 30 or 40 years ago. I remember,
Well, that precedes me.
yeah, I think, do you remember that, John? Because I remember Steve Eastman at the Mountaineer was kind of big on that, leading the charge. And I think it was, oh gosh, who was the guy? I forget now, in Bartlett, in Albany. Slugger. I think he was involved with that. Slugger Hill. But anyway, is the Conway, who's in charge of who's responsible for the Saco River Bridge? Is that a state thing?
It's owned by the
okay.
state.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. Okay, the other thing last night, today's Thursday, March 27th, and last night was the vote at the North Conway precinct, and they voted 55-2, and this is going to be easy to get in the weeds, but let's not. We already did a show with the ambulance services, but so they voted to buy 2 ambulances, right? And this is my layman's understanding of this. The town, the Conway Selectmen, you're trying to go into it's all been recommended to go to a town-wide ambulance service. Now,
Bringing it in-house, not paying a contractor.
right, but does this go against a town-wide service? Because I know you're going to have a revenue share and all that, but what was the town's preference, John? To not have North Conway buy their own 2 ambulances?
No, well, I mean, from my perspective, I think this is going to be a good thing. North Conway came into the game a little late in our committee thing, but Paul and myself, I've communicated a lot with the chief. Paul has communicated with Deb Favre, one of the commissioners. I think that I think it's good, and I think it will work because what you have seen in the past, to be brief, is that Conway and North Conway can't work together. And we would have an intermunicipal agreement similar to what they have with, or what we're working on in water and sewer. And they would create a budget, we would create a budget, and then we'd bring it all together, and it would, because all taxpayers pay for ambulance, and it would fall under the supervision of myself and then the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee. And the only difference is Chief McCarthy would still be in charge of his people, but when we do billing, it would be billed out. Currently, right now, North Conway's billing is much higher than it is in Conway. So if you had to have an ambulance ride, any one of us, God forbid, here, you'd pay close to $3,000. And if you had the same medical issue in Conway Village, you'd pay $1,200 for the trip to Memorial. So we're trying to, bring that together, and also the cost sharing as far as revenue, which would be between $700,000 and $800,000 in revenue, would go back to the town to lower what ambulance service is going to cost townwide.
Right, and the contract is the contract you have now with Action ends in next year, right? 26.
The end of the year.
And Paul, is it town's perspective that it would have been preferable not for North Conway to buy? I guess where I'm getting hung up is that the town, the selectmen, the subcommittee and all that recommended a town-wide ambulance. Well, that suggests to me that North Conway doesn't own their own ambulances, that the town, Conway, the town would buy them and then store them up here somewhere. Was that the preference of town hall?
So that was the direction we were heading, right? When we first started, the question was to still contract with a private entity, a for-profit entity, or to bring it in-house.
Right.
And so we embarked on that, and the decision was that it should be a municipal function. It shouldn't be something we contract with a private entity.
For 2 reasons. One is because it's more expensive when you contract it, and also you're going to have a higher level of service.
Correct.
Both of those are correct.
Okay.
Exactly. So, and we just started there because, well, North Conway currently doesn't have an ambulance service, right? But along the way, as you started to look at the logistics of that, we would need a total of 4 ambulances in town, right?
2 and 2.
2 and 2, right? 2 with Action, 2 with Conway, 2 with North Conway. However you cut it,
Right.
we need 4 ambulances in town. And so if, again, before we knew that North Conway was interested in doing this, we just assumed it would be a function of the greater municipality, right? North Conway is a quasi-municipal sub-entity of the bigger town, right? And so we said, well, geez, we're going to need to park 2 of these ambulances in North Conway someplace. Currently, Action Ambulance rents property in Redstone. So where would we put them? So one of the things and it was clear that the best place would be the new fire station, in North Conway, or their other building, their auxiliary building on Seavey Street.
One right up here.
Yeah.
Right
You
next to
remember
Decker.
that used to be a town-owned building. It used to be the old police station going way back. And during Earl's administration, we transferred that property to the North Conway
And now it's
precinct.
basically storage.
Well, they have a lot of firefighting equipment that, their backcountry, their forestry stuff, their river things, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So, and ambulance is something that needs to be staffed 24/7, so you'll need sleeping quarters. And well, fire stations have sleeping quarters. So we approached them about what would it cost, to rent a spot for the bus, the ambulance, and to rent, rooms for the personnel. As they started thinking about it, they decided, well, we'd rather do that and then take our costs and your costs and pool them and then distribute that cost over the whole town. So 2 different ways to skin the cat, if you will. And no actual cats will be harmed in this ambulance implementation. And pros and cons in either way. In both cases, the town, greater town, right? Assuming that when I'm saying town, that includes North Conway, needed to acquire 2 more ambulances. So we were either doing it administratively out of town hall and then parking them up in North Conway, or they were going to do it.
All right.
In either case, we're going to need to hire more people. We would have to hire them, and we'd have a rotating schedule, and some of them, or they would hire them.
Right.
So, for all intents and purposes, it's the same sort of function. What's different is that you'll have 2 administrative bodies in control. You'll have 2 budgets, and the greater town, which is going to share in the costs of the combined, will not have input into the budgets of North Conway Water Precinct, right? So that's the only difference I can see between doing it that way and doing it our way. So we're splitting the management of people, the hiring of people, et cetera, et cetera.
And the ambulance cost, and this is the reasoning, which this is why I like this so much better, is that
you like the North Conway having their own
I do.
ambulance? Okay.
I do because for the first time that I can remember, that we're actually working together and trying to solve. And Action gave us a cost, and I asked Action and both chiefs to give me a cost in 2025, so that we, doing this non-binding referendum, so to speak, we couldn't put it in 27's cost because we don't know what those are. But 2.2 for us to do it together with North Conway, 3.6 was Action. So it's a difference of $1.4 million. And it's actually more than that, because Action Ambulance, if they did the whole town at 3.6, they're also going to keep the revenue of $700,000 to $800,000.
Which we get now.
So the reason I like this is that Conway Village, for decades, even way before me, the people of the district had bought their own ambulances. Chief McCarthy's philosophy, and I totally agree with his philosophy, is that the people of Conway Village had made a commitment to buy, so they make a commitment. So the 2 ambulances that will be purchased by the North Conway Water Precinct. And then that kind of gets them into this. And because it passed, now all of ambulance service will be, we'll have the same kind of service, ALS, and the billing will be the same. It'll be billed out. So if North Conway goes to a call and they come to the Daily Sun and take an employee or anyone, you're not getting a different bill because it's that part of town. It's going to be a lot more.
But the counter argument to that is that just seems like one more thing where North Conway's not a quote unquote, but sort of in the way of not combining municipal services. Like, it just seems to me, and I don't know how political you're being with that, John, by saying, oh, it's great that they're doing it, but it just seems to me as a layperson, it'd just be simpler if Conway, the greater town, just managed the whole thing. And
that's certainly a valid position, right? And there are people on either side of that, but let's approach it from a different angle. Same topic, but a different angle. You know, you have the sun at different times of the day. It's still the sun, but it has different shadows, right?
Oh, they're very good.
So, okay, so we're going to partner with this subset of the municipality, this quasi-municipal entity, to provide townwide ambulance. But 100 or 1,500 people will vote on the greater town budget, but 57 people, you said 55 and 2, will vote on the ambulance budget.
Right.
The same is true of fire. Only in this case, we're down from 5, we're down to 3, right? But, you know, we're partnering with North Conway to get the best possible service in the town, right? Again, 50 voters, right? And 1,500 voters. That's just a fact. So going forward in the future, if you're providing these services townwide and you're distributing the costs for same townwide, but you have one of those entities that you're partnered with making budgetary decisions with a fraction of the voters, what will happen if this becomes a disparity? You know, who will have the higher fire rate? Who will have the higher, you know, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, we're combining right now for water and for sewage treatment, right? And that's not just the town. You know, I've been an advocate that when we're talking about sewage treatment, we should be talking about the Lower Mount Washington Valley Treatment District, because Lower Bartlett is about to hook up, right? And because there's a lot of history there, and there's a lot of arguments as to why that should be. So if you're sharing these costs evenly, then the question, but you're only having a small fraction of the voters, you know, vote, what's the purpose of that? So really the bigger question, as you said, is townwide. The bigger question is, what's the most efficient way to do it? And we can't answer that sitting here today. But if you look around, New Hampshire, New England, just keep getting better. This model that we're currently under, which is a remnant of precincts and villages, is disappearing.
Yeah, no, it just seems, and you know, the good people in North Conway, I'm in the precinct here, so I'm not being critical, but it just seems as though, I mean, someone said to me that they heard someone, and you know, that why they have an $8 million fire station over there is because they got 55 people voting on it. You know,
I believe that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, right? Like, so they have a lot of power, those 57 people, whatever.
So, and if you compare the rate for fire service in the two, one reflects, you know, a $7 million fire station.
Yeah, no.
Not saying that the station wasn't needed. Not saying that. I mean, I think it's a great building. Yeah. It fits in the heart of, you know, North Conway Village. It's
beautiful,
pleasing, right?
Yeah.
All voters can say, and they would be correct, is that they're being asked to share in these costs that they can't vote for or against.
Right. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing.
The budget committee doesn't review North Conway's budget.
There's still a little parochialism about
But they would the ambulance budget. And it may not be 100% clean the way people like, but I honestly believe that we are seeing some progress. As Paul said, we've gone from 5 precincts. We're really down to 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, who would have thought? I mean, you've said it, and people have said it on budget committee. People all over town have said, why aren't we all doing this together? And I say, I don't know. And it makes more sense.
The meetings and the communication and the cooperation, you know, that we're now seeing from Chief McCarthy and his staff and Chief Anderson and
Remington?
Remington, rather. Yeah. And it's coming. His name's not coming to mind. It's Senator Conway.
Oh, Glenn Merrill.
And Glenn Merrill. He's coming.
You know, I've been here a minute now, and I'm here to reiterate what John said, which is that we have not seen this level of teamwork and cooperation in the past.
All right, so let's leave it at that. That's good. Let's move on. We got a lot to cover. The housing. Okay, let's again another super complicated topic, but on voting for housing inspections and all that, you have Articles 16 and 17, which I think, one, explain them, and on the other side of it, you have 55 and 56, which are petitioned articles from the short-term rental crowd, which is saying get rid of all the inspections and do all that, right?
Right.
And I thought the town warrant used to have petitioned article by so-and-so in it years ago, and now it doesn't say that anymore.
They may have years ago. I don't know when it stopped, but I think that back
a good idea.
In the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, it was there.
Right, because it's a good idea, because it gives voters an idea who petitioned it. I
Right.
mean, all you see with 55 and 56, it's not recommended by the selectmen and maybe even the planning board.
And usually, typically, what happens is the first person on the petition seems to be the person that would be listed, because when the petition for this group that came in, it was Paul Mayer who actually dropped it off, and he doesn't live in Conway, so he's not on the petition, but he's the architect of it.
Okay,
So Paul Mayer, everyone knows, is a realtor in the Jackson area, and he's been involved in the leadership of this group, which calls themselves the Responsible Short-Term Rental Owners.
right.
Right, and way back when the selectmen said we want a life safety, code inspection for all rental property in Conway, I reached out to Paul, and at the time David Kavanaugh was the president, to give him a seat at the table. So this is what what I've been assigned to do, and we'd like you guys to have your table and have the input. And their message from the get-go was, we don't want a seat at the table, we don't like the dinner being served at this table, and we're going to fight you in court. And they've been very consistent in that. They have filed in court. And Paul Mayer filed these two articles, which have the intent of gutting 72, making it completely useless.
Got 72, what's 72?
72 is
Chapter
Chapter
72.
72.
Oh, sorry,
It's
in the regulations.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the it's the standards and the rental licensing program.
All the program that you guys are trying to put in place.
Yeah.
Basically, they're trying to wipe it out.
That's what those articles do, right?
All right, so that's a pretty simple decision, and obviously the town is against it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And, okay, so let's go to the other side. It's obviously why you're against it. So, but meanwhile, there's the inspection program is on hold, basically, the affidavit. And then we got 16 and 17, which is one, I only have my notes here,
16
John.
and
Housing
17 are
standards.
not housing
So 16 is the wetland and watershed protection.
Maybe I have it wrong.
Yeah.
17 is definition of a
Kennels?
kennel.
I'm not
Oh,
sure
you're
what
looking at the wrong,
Yeah, so.
wait a minute,
okay,
you're looking
let me-
at last year's.
No,
Yeah,
Go to the blue.
the blue.
oh, sorry.
Those are the reports from last year. So we'll chat about that a little bit.
So even before that, Paul, where
Yeah,
are we
sure.
now? The inspection program is on hold, but there's also a lawsuit
Yeah.
filed.
So the short-term rental group filed a lawsuit claiming that the provisions of 72, the whole rental licensing program, is illegal in the state of New Hampshire. So that's what happened. So we had gone to the court twice now since the original pretrial conference was scheduled, and the first time to say, hey, we're in the process of refining 72, and here it is for this year's vote. And so really, it might make sense, to wait. And so we should wait till after the vote in April. So the petitioner said, well, we don't want to wait that long. Let's take a look at what they have, and then we'll make a decision. So they rescheduled a second hearing for February. And we got 72 out there. It's on the warrant. And we went back to court and said, hey, really, we should see how the voters vote on this and on the short-term renters petitioned.
Okay.
And so it's been rescheduled yet again for May.
Okay, so you've delayed it for the votes.
Which
Makes
is
sense.
sensible,
Right.
The court saw the wisdom in that. It was pardon the cliche, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So that's where that is right now.
Okay, so getting back to what's on the warrant, John.
So the first two had to do with really the building side of things, if I've got those right.
Housing and life safety
Yeah.
standards.
Are they related though, right?
No, they're not related to 72. It's what we're seeing is that, well, let's back up. You will recall that Conway town of includes all the Conways. You'd be surprised how many times I have to explain that to people.
Yeah, I live in East Conway.
I'm the town engineer for Conway. Oh, is that anywhere near North Conway?
Yeah.
Anyway, so you will realize that we never in the history of the town inspected
Residential.
brand new residential construction.
Or any residential.
1 and 2.
Or any residential. I mean, you've never inspected any residential.
Correct, but if
Right.
you come in for a building permit,
Right.
we're going to issue you this permit, but we're not going to come out and inspect it.
Okay. Can you, this is a little digression. Someone
Okay.
said in one of the interviews, can you do your own plumbing and electrical work in your own house? You have to be licensed. Can you literally do your own plumbing?
I'm going to, you, gosh.
Well, let me ask you, do you do your own plumbing?
I do. I'm going to defer to, you know, our building inspector, because there are all of these updates that happen in the codes all the time vis-a-vis bulletins, which is one of the problems we ran into when we first started Chapter 72. You may remember the argument of hardwired
Right.
versus not. And we were quoting
Hardwired for fire.
smoke detectors.
Yeah, smoke detectors.
We were quoting the actual law, but in New Hampshire, the way it works is whatever was adopted in the codes plus bulletins. And so bulletins are revisions, and then in so many years you accumulate so many revisions, and then they update the whole code. So the short-term rental folks were quick to say, wait a minute, you don't have to have, it's not required to be hardwired, see bulletin, blah, blah, blah. And we looked at it and went, oh yeah, they're right. When did this come out? You know,
Okay.
a couple of years old. What we had was still the latest code,
Right.
but we didn't,
Have the bulletin.
right, and because, you know, this is a new area.
So if I go into a building permit and I say, hey, Paul, I want a building permit, I'm going to build a house, I want to do my own electrical and plumbing, can I do that?
One of the things on the permit is, will this house be in rental? And if you check no, and then you can do your work.
Even, okay.
So if you check no, and then you put it into rental, well, then you're not in compliance.
All right. But the idea that people doing their own work, I thought that was, for some reason I thought like if you get home insurance. I mean, anyway, that's another story. So,
So now our building permits, especially our commercial building
Right.
permits, there's not a single permit any longer, because that's not how the industry works. So you come in, you can get a demo permit, you can get a foundation permit, then you get this permit for structure, separate for electrical, mechanical, and plumbing.
wow.
And that's how these big hotels are working. They're starting the site work. They've given the job to the guy who's going to erect the building. That's a different contractor than who's doing the site work. They haven't picked, the guy who's erecting the building hasn't picked an electrician yet, because they're still beating people up for
Right.
the best number they can get.
All right, so that's the commercial side, but residential in terms of these home inspections.
We're now breaking up the residential permit the same way, because we've got people saying the same thing. Well, I haven't picked a plumber yet, or I don't know, or, you know, blah, blah, blah.
So
blah.
is 17, John, is that the one, which is the one that's cleaning up the inspection, the language
So
to clean up the
to
inspection?
require a certificate of occupancy.
So that's getting back to what I started to say,
Yeah.
which is we never did these building permits
Right.
before. And what we're finding now is that lending agencies want a CO.
A what?
A CO, certificate of occupancy.
Okay.
So if you're building your own private home on the lake, or anywhere else for that matter, and you've got a mortgage, right? You've got a construction loan and whatnot. Before they sign off on the construction side of your loan and flick it over to your mortgage, they want a CO, right? And this is the model across the nation, but we're late to the party. So we started with the building permit requirement, and now we're following up with this. It's just cleaning up.
Okay, so assuming
So
that
we now
passes,
issue a CO for your residential.
but a certificate of occupancy means what? What does that mean?
It means that you built the house in accordance with the applicable codes.
Okay, so, but in terms of the inspection program being on hold, you're waiting for the town vote, but what's the town vote that you're waiting for? Is
Oh.
that 17?
No, it's for 72, the adoption of 72.
What article is that? I mean, not
Chapter 72 is article, and what happened there is that was done last year's town meeting.
Article 16 is to amend Chapter 72.
Right.
Okay, so that's the one, I do have that here. So
Yeah.
Article 6, just to cut to the chase,
Yep.
Article 16 cleans up the inspection program.
That's correct.
If that happens, then you're going to feel comfortable if it doesn't go through, I guess you got a combination of things. One is 55 and 56 pass, which is trying to eliminate it all. That's that segment. If 17 is whatever that was, 17,
16 and
16 doesn't pass, where does that put the whole inspection program?
That's a good question.
All right. So you're recommending that it does.
Well, the Board of Selectmen, are.
Right.
And as I've quibbed for years, and it's been a couple of years now,
Yeah.
I'm staff, I have no opinion. And I'm so close to the end, I'm just going to stick with that policy. So,
Okay.
But, the voters of Conway adopted 72 last year.
Right.
And so that says, and the selectmen, so both of those groups, the legislative body and the Board of Selectmen, were in favor.
Right.
And then, of course, you have the Budget Committee. And so, if I'm speaking on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, by their vote, I would say, yes, they're urging, the taxpayers to vote in favor for these amendments. And what these amendments are is they included definitions that were missing.
Yeah.
We see what's happening in these court cases. They're technicalities, or you're missing a definition. The fine structure wasn't in there. The enabling authority wasn't all listed. You may remember we embarked under the Selectmen's powers for licensing and whatnot, RSA 41 and 38. And then we switched to 72 because stakeholders such as Eliza Grant and Joy Tarbell preferred that method. Yeah. And so this was cleaning up the document and combining it. And for those reasons, we decided, well, let's just pause the program until we get this done. Then the lawsuit was filed, so it made even more sense to pause the
John,
program.
this, assuming it passes, and it probably will, because most of those type of things pass if they're recommended by the selectmen and the planning board, because regular people don't understand what they say.
It was recommended 5-0 and recommended by the Budget Committee 11-1. I'll give you a quick, I've been here 35 years, and I went back through all of it. There's never been an article ever in the history to fail other than COVID year when Tom Holmes asked the people and the selectmen, even though they'd already put in the vote, to reject everything because we didn't know where it was going. But above and beyond that, there's never been an article that has failed that was recommended by both the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee.
One reason
you never say never, but
that's why we were trying to get a charter commission, because those votes are kind of useless, frankly. But
Yes.
anyway.
Yeah.
So, John, in terms of the process, so let's say 16. Assume 16 passes, which it probably will, but you still have the lawsuit hanging out there. Is the inspection program still on hold until the lawsuit is resolved?
I believe the board would do that because that only makes sense, right? Why start again and fall back? And
are you guys anticipating that if the lawsuit is successful for the short-term rental people, that kills the inspection program?
No, not necessarily. You have to see what the court's decision is. They may find a technicality and say this is unclear, so you could make those modifications and come back.
Yeah.
Right? They may say, yeah, we agree with the town, so we're not going to grant the petitioner, and they will appeal, right? Now, let's just take that scenario. Let's say that the state agrees with us that it's lawful and appropriate to require all rental property to pass life safety codes. And we get that decision, well, then we start the program right up.
Right.
They appeal. Are we going to wait till the appeal's through?
Right.
That's going to be a decision of the Board of Selectmen, right? So rather than speculate, let's see what happens first at the polls, right? Will the people adopt the revisions to 72 as they adopt 72 last year? And then see what happens, at court. I could see a scenario where if the court agrees that what the selectmen have embarked on is correct, that we start immediately, and that would include enforcement.
Okay.
And even though there's appeals out there, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so why don't we leave that there? That's a complicated, the inspection process. Probably the sexiest thing on the ballot is Article 57. And that's the, if I can use that term. I'm not sure you could apply sexy to Mark Hounsel, but we might as well. So he sponsored this.
No comment, none whatsoever.
So Article 57, and it's not complicated, but there's a little tangle we weave here, web we weave, because on the selectmen's race, Peter Donahoe, who's challenging Carl Thibodeau, well, one of the major issues, Peter, and I don't want to speak for him, but it's obvious, one of the major issues he's running on, he supports Article 57. And even though Article 57 ostensibly is about, let's have the planning board and the Conway selectmen work together, but Mark, it's really targeting the rec path.
Absolutely.
It's all about the rec path. And so, and it's a hot political potato. I mean, Mark and his brother Bill are really strong advocates for it. The counter argument to it is that, and Mark in his column himself said that the parking lot that was paved by the church or by the Conway L down there, on Article 57 would have had to go through public hearings and then a town vote. And I say if you guys can't pave a parking lot,
it's absolutely absurd.
And the premise was,
and the premise is absurd.
The premise was that the Brown Church, and there was extensive flooding due to that parking lot. And if you, I'm the hydrology and all of that, but the water didn't come. The water, if people know where the Seidenstucker gym is and when you can drive behind the middle school, the water mark was it was above the banking, it was on the pavement, and it was 3 inches. I went there and saw it, 3 inches from going into the Seidenstucker gym. So then that water went up behind Conway Elementary, or Mountainside, whatever you want to call it now. Behind there, the dugouts of the ball field, the water was 4.5 feet tall. So it went into the Robert Frost. Robert Frost School had all kinds of grass and open area, and it didn't get flooded because all of a sudden there was a parking lot put in here. And that's not true.
So what people don't realize is that storm was a fraction of an inch from the 500-year storm, right? So
500-year storm. Do we have a record of a 500-year storm?
Correct.
We do.
No.
No, I mean, there is no such thing as a 500-year storm.
There is. No, there is. And there's a value for it. And, engineers, people who deal with stormwater, have the 1 year, the 10-year, the 50-year, et cetera, et cetera. So what that was implied to mean is that you can expect this water level once every 100 years. Okay, well, we have had a 100-year level 4 times in the last 12 years. Climate change, I think everyone will stop there. So, Doug Burnell, who's been here for generations, his father was here, right? His house flooded. It's never flooded before, right? He knows where the 100-year floodplain is. He's been a surveyor. His father was a surveyor. His son, Seth, is a surveyor, right? And the 100-year flood level, he actually has a marker on his property.
And where does he live?
He lives
right off Hillside Avenue.
Right, exactly. Yep, right by the bridge. If you're headed east on 113, you'll see there's this house by the river that's being elevated, right? They flooded. They had never flooded before. So we asked HEB, I asked Seth to go around and survey these silt lines and found that we were just shy of a 500-year event.
How do they even measure? How do you even come up with a 500-year? Nobody was here 500 years ago.
Well, I guess it's a lot of modeling and prediction.
Okay,
but
so the water.
That's all done by FEMA.
Mark, one last thing. You know where Washington Street Park is?
Yeah, it flooded.
Okay, there was water within 4 inches of that whole. That's never. I mean, I'm 61 years old. Never seen that. Water has never come that far.
Right.
But we digress. So
so a parking lot is not the reason. Right. The Brown Church and the Robert Frost flood.
That's just an example of individuals giving information that's not accurate,
right,
in order to have an outcome that they desire. In this case, defeat the rec path.
Okay, so but part of the getting back to the rec path, and I think the question is, and Peter Donahoe's questioning the legitimacy of the whole process. I think, and I'm speaking for him when I really can't about how it got approved, but the rec path. So your side would argue
there was many meetings, right? Individuals on both sides of the argument came to lots of selectmen's meetings, more public hearings, and it gave the town administration a chance to showcase what actually happened in the rec path. And we went back through all the dates and all the documents and all the public hearings and the votes all the way back to 2011, right? And I believe that process demonstrated that those accusations, those implications of wrongdoing were completely unfounded. They're false, right? And the selectmen were persuaded that along the way, with all those public hearings and public information projects, the selectmen were also persuaded that this is a vocal minority, because both sides of the argument came to the meetings. And so the selectmen at one time considering, well, maybe we'll put an article on, are you in favor of phase 2? And then they decided we don't need to. The process was done correctly. At these gatherings, right, the folks in favor outweigh the folks opposed. Look at the vote. We built phase 1. Look at the vote for, will the town take over the ownership and the maintenance responsibility for phase 1? Right, what were the results of that vote? Like 1,500 for and 100 against, right? So the selectmen are saying, Jesus, this is wanted by the community, right? Now, I lived through all of the NIMBY arguments with the bypass, so did you. I have to confess, I never saw the I don't want the rec path in my neighborhood argument coming. But that's what we have. There were lots of accusations about improper process. Then there was accusations about environmental concerns, et cetera, that, these are federally funded projects. We have to check all those boxes. The amount of work and the report that we have to produce under NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, right? It's stringent, it's rigorous. And yet we have people coming to public meetings and say, well, I have a concern that no one's looked at the, water quality, right? And that's, that's an individual's opinion. They have a right to express their opinion, but then I expect that they should listen to the information, the answer to that concern, which is, here's the requirements. We did it in this project, we did it in that project, blah, blah, blah. I have a concern that if we don't meet the letter of all of these federal requirements, that the taxpayers will be on the hook for this. Well, as the guy who administered all these projects for the last 30 years, that's happened, well, never. But thanks for sharing your concern. But there was all sorts of inference and whatnot. They originally tried to defeat the project by something shady or wrong was here. We brought it all out into the public over many meetings, over many months, and the board went, sounds like this is on the up and up.
All right. So, okay.
I'm done.
Okay, John. You think just politically, do you think the good folks in the KLP have been listened to and were by the town selectmen?
I do. I think what the argument that we have heard is that the planning board, as you know, planning board and selectmen don't work together.
They had a subcommittee.
Yeah. The subcommittee, they formed a subcommittee, not at the request of the Board of Selectmen. The planning board formed a subcommittee, and most of the subcommittee was not for the rec path, and they put together all of these questions like they thought that the selectmen were bound. But in those questions, to what Paul said, there's history that goes back to 2015. And I believe in today's Call Me Daily Sun is a response. The Board of Selectmen said, we want to respond. So that's what they did. That's their, I work for them. That's their prerogative. But what I believe a lot of the negative stuff is that is to say that because the subcommittee gave a report and the selectmen didn't act on it because it had no bearing on it, because a lot of the things that they had already said, they talked about environmental issues, and Paul just mentioned that. They can't build a rec path through Whitaker Woods without the federal government okaying the environmental. They've talked about aquifer and that's the main water source. It's not. And you're looking at 1,500 feet. That's it in a scarce section or off to the right-hand side of the rec path, and that it's impervious and it's going to ruin the environment. The federal government isn't going to sign off on anything if that is the case.
And I think you got Kearsarge Road going up there. There's a lot of salt that comes off that road, right?
Yeah,
it goes into,
And to Paul.
Well, let's just talk about that.
Okay,
like
so let me just set it up by this.
Okay.
Peter, and again, I interviewed Peter Donahoe and Carl Thibodeau, so it's fresh in my memory. But I think Peter said that he's really not against the path, but that 1,500 feet of pavement.
But there's a reason.
The reason that it's paved, or the reason he's against it?
Well, I believe the argument is we're not against a rec path, we're just against paving.
Right.
But they know that there's an angle there because they applied the Trails Association applied for pavement to coincide with phase 1, and they know that's in the grant, that if it's not paved, then the project goes away. So it's much easier to say, we don't want it to be paved. We're okay if it's crushed stone and stone dust, and we'll accept that. But they know that if it's not paved, the project goes away, and therefore there's not a rec path.
There's all this rhetoric about the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board not getting together. You know, and I was in a meeting the other day with Ben Colbath, chair of the Planning Board, and Steve Porter, who's the Selectmen's representative, and you should bring both of those in, and they will tell you that's not true.
Right. No,
Right. We've worked very closely together for years. Further, back in the planning process when this whole started, there are trails. Before this interview, you were talking to me about some of the trails you hike right in here in town. We have more trails than anybody else. Mountain biking trails, climbing, hiking trails, right? What we didn't have, which we discovered as part of the planning process, and I wasn't even part of this project back then, right? Was that we don't have a paved rec path. We don't have a pathway for folks who are unsure on their feet, folks who have disabilities, folks who are in wheelchairs, a place for parents to feel comfortable to teach their kids who are just taking training wheels off, where they're not going to share the road with a motorist, et cetera, et cetera. This is what the planning process resulted in. We don't have this amenity for our aging population. And to listen to current members of the planning board say, you were never asked, we were never asked. That's not true. You were asked, but you weren't part of the planning board when we went through this planning process. You didn't even live in town at the time. So projects as complicated and as expensive as this take many years to reach fruition, right? And so anyway, that was all debunked. There's a lot of misinformation. Earl Sires, former town manager, posted on social media today, 57 is an attempt to stop the rec path, right? 57 is unnecessary because the processes and procedures you're asking are already in place. 57 will add undue burden. You made reference to the Charter Commission, right? Because it's cumbersome to only convene your legislative body once a year, right? Imagine I've got to convene the legislative body to put up a shed, for salt, or cut more than 6 trees. Right. It's crazy, right? So these are facts, right? These aren't opinions, right? This happened, right? It's not recommended by the Board of Selectmen. It's not recommended by the Budget Committee. It's not recommended by the Conservation Commission, right? And it's not recommended by our former, town manager. There's a lot of misinformation going on, which I find disturbing. I've made a career out of being accurate and factual. And so it's disturbing to me to see a group not use factual information to get an outcome they want. For instance, Chubby Whitaker donated this property to the town of Conway, right? Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute. Chubby Whitaker did not donate it. If you go to the Whitaker house today, right now, you'll see a picture on the wall of Chet Lucy, right, handing a check to Chubby Whitaker. And by the way, Nat Lucy, Chet's son, and Dan Lucy, right, his younger son, are both members of the Conservation Commission, which voted not to support.
So Chubby,
57.
It was bought by Chubby.
It was purchased. Right? He
the
sold it to us.
LWCF money.
Part of that money was a federal grant from the LWCF, and that wild and free language was their requirement. And it's on public properties and parks and recreation lands that they funded all across New England, up to and including Katahdin
And then
State
you got to
Park.
define what wild is, right?
But
Well, let's talk about that for a moment.
They have grooming machines.
Let me just talk about that.
There we go.
You a minute ago mentioned the Peter Donahoe interview, right? Well, you did another Peter Donahoe interview about a year ago because he was representing the Ski Touring Foundation. And he was talking about using crushed asphalt and surplus gravels to smooth up the trails, right? And they've gone into Whitaker Woods. Everyone can see they've widened the trails. They've cut down trees to make little stashes so that they can farm snow and lean snow years and bring it out into the trails, et cetera. And he was talking about the wrap. And one of your interviewers, maybe even you, asked them, well, what about the wild and free? I invite everybody to go to Sun TV and look at Mr. Donahoe's response on wild and free and now it's 180 degrees.
What did he say then?
Well, he just said, well, was anything wild and free anymore, really?
Right.
So we're locked in between all these roads.
Ski grooming is not trail maintenance.
So this is
this
is inaccurate information that's intended to get an emotional response out of the voters.
But there's only 1,500 that's paved. What's the rest of it?
No, there's only 1,500 that's in the original Whitaker parcel. Whitaker Woods is 3 parcels. There's the Bancroft parcel, the Chubby Whitaker parcel, and I forget the third one.
So the whole thing is going to be paved?
The entire rec path, just like you see in phase 1, is intended to be paved. What they're arguing about, really, if you're talking about this Chubby Whitaker piece, is 1,500 feet of it.
Okay, so the reason I do the 1,500, because that's the part that goes through Whitaker Woods. But the rest of the whole thing is going to be paved. It's not like it's gravel and then we're just doing this one section because it's steep or something.
Living in northern New England, the argument can come out all day long about stone dust, crushed gravel, but we live in northern New England where we get a lot of snow, we get rain, you get washouts. Who is going to go in there and maintain it? It's going to have to be the town. And when my dad, prior to him passing away, was in a wheelchair. He wasn't a real big man, but he was 170 pounds. There isn't any way I could have wheeled my father in there if he had wanted to. And at one of the public meetings that the selectmen had, where both sides came, the opposition said, well, if people need extra help, they can just go to phase 1. And so the argument just goes on and on. I don't deny that stone dust, and does it have to happen? No, but the grant has done that, and I think that it'll be interesting because a yes vote on 57 is a no vote for the rec path, and it started out as this has nothing to do with the rec path. If I was at the selectmen's meeting when it was brought up, public hearing, it had everything to do with and then town meeting, which I believe you even said something. It definitely had something to do with the rec path and only the rec path.
Yeah. All right. So we only have 5 minutes, and Paul, I want to get to the reminiscences of town.
Before we move to that, I just want to say, as staff, we're neither for or against the rec path publicly, right? But the voters should have accurate information, and shame on those folks who, to get the outcome they want, they will put misinformation out there.
Okay, good point. Now, just in general...
And ask yourself, why didn't they just petition to allow the rec path or not to allow the rec path?
Right,
why did they do it in this way?
Through this 57 thing.
And
why do you think...
leave that to the voters to decide.
I mean, what's Mark Consul's...
Don't know.
I mean, he's a Coney Village guy. It just doesn't,
He's crossed the line. He's in North Conway now.
Chet Lucy would have been proud. He said, as long as I've lived here, there'll always be a Mason-Dixon line.
Yeah,
and
really.
So
But Mark crossed it.
Yeah, good. That's fine with me. I'm all about the whole town, anyways. I don't think it matters where you sleep at night. But Mark, you've been around long enough since the late '70s, early '80s to know that it's really territorial. People want you to stay in your lane. We hear that a lot. Stay in your lane, and I think it's counterproductive. That's why I'm very happy about this whole ambulance thing.
All right. Okay. Very good. But just really quickly, Paul, this doesn't go. There was talk about going underneath Route 16 of the scenic vista, right? But
yes.
But that's not happening with
this. That's
not
in this phase.
Okay. Where does it end exactly?
This phase ends at Intervale Crossroad.
By the post office?
Yes.
Right by the post office.
Yeah,
right where the railroad tracks.
Right, but the railroad has an extra wide section there, so there was room for the existing tracks, the railroad, and a parking lot. So, and then that parcel is adjacent to, I believe, property owned by Jamie Gimetti.
Jamie Gimetti, right.
Which is an actual old railroad building.
Yeah. Does it make any sense to put a tunnel? I mean, that seems like isn't that an idea, is to put a tunnel under the road?
Yeah, the idea was that we wanted the northern terminus to be co-located with the scenic vista, because there's bathrooms and there's a lot of parking.
Yeah.
And because now it's a nice way to cross Route 16, just like the rec pack through Franconia Parkway.
Right. Okay, so we'll leave that. We only have little. And Paul, when when are you retiring? Next fall?
End of September, this coming fall.
Okay, so we'll have
6 months.
We'll have you back. When you come back, and we can do a look back with Paul.
Sure, that could be fun. Yeah,
and we got 5 minutes left. What do you? I mean, you've been here 30, whatever you said, 33 years. 33. So you were here when the original town, traditional town meetings, right?
Yep.
So back in the day when there were hundreds of people. what's your general sense of whether we should be, well, I'm going to ask you this. You think we should be, do you like the SB2 process versus the traditional?
Okay, so now you ask for like, which is not just factual, but an opinion.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I miss the Old Town meeting. I really do. And I acknowledge that we've outgrown the Old Town meeting, but now we're in this limbo. Look at how many people come to the deliberative portion, right? And so we're now using social media, the internet, right? Other platforms to get the information out there, right? But the fact is that folks are voting representatively, right? They're looking at, did the budget committee support it? Did the planning board support it? Did the board of selectmen, et cetera, right? Because the issues are complicated. And so I believe, again, this is my opinion, that we've outgrown this form of government and we should go to a council form of government. But I fully understand that people don't want to delegate their ability to cast a vote to somebody else. So having said that, in the Old Town meeting, we stayed on one issue and we went back and forth. The moderator allowed questions and answers until everyone felt like they had all the facts and that they could make a decision. And the one that comes to mind involved Ray Levitt, who was on the Board of Selectmen that interviewed and hired me. And we were mandated by the state and the feds through EPA to cap our old landfill. And Ray and I debated. Like there was a point I stopped sitting down, right? Mr. Moderator, yeah. And we went back and forth. And to this day, it's a fond memory. And I thought, this is democracy at the grassroots, right? We're going to go. Ray had lots of good questions. He was questioning the science of the benefit of doing this, and I questioned it myself. And we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Took up almost an hour, and then I got the final closing. Tom Steele was the moderator, and my response was that I enjoyed the opportunity. I hope everyone had their answers questioned. Ray's questions were insightful and spot on. Many of those issues plagued me, but I am a licensed professional engineer, and I'm required to hold that license to hold this job by the people of Conway. And I'm required by that license to uphold the laws and the statutes in the state of New Hampshire. So I can't stand here publicly and advise you, the legislative body, to do anything but comply with the law. Huh. Thank you very much. And we capped the landfill. But it was a very close vote. And you know that everybody casting a vote understood, because we spent over an hour on it. And there were 200 people that day casting a vote. When we went to SB2 deliver the casting of votes, our votes went up to 1,800. And then as the time went down, they whittled, and I think we reached equal around 1,500 or so. 1,500 to 1,600. Which is a lot more than 200 people squeezing into a gym. Yeah. And it's, and as much as I'm always surprised at the wisdom of the voter. Like on most of these votes, they'll go with the recommendations from the selectmen and the planning board, but every once in a while they'll pick one out. And I'm always actually amazed and impressed. I want to, another fond memory. We've talked a lot about Mark Hounsell today. And early in my tenure, you will remember that I was interim town manager. When our town manager left, we were almost 7 months without a town manager. And Mark Hounsell was a selectman at that time, and he came to me and he said, listen, in my experience, although it takes longer than in private industry, but in my experience, you said the wisdom of the voter will do the right thing. Yeah. And I have to say that my experience is that Mark was correct, which is what you're saying. Yeah, no, I agree. And we have 1 minute, John. Any message for the voters as we're head to the ballot on April 8th?
No, I agree with what Paul is saying. I would love to see 2,500 people come out, and it's their town. It's their money. It's their issues, and I hope people will come out and vote and support whoever or whatever they believe is in the best interest of the town and themselves. And I'm anxiously looking forward to our little ambulance referendum, because I think it'll give a clear message as to what's going to be in our best interest. We did get, I wouldn't use the word beat up, but there was a lot of talk at town meeting about binding and non-binding, and at the end of the day, I went to Paul a year ago and said, we should get out in front of this and we should form a committee, and we should be open and transparent. But that old thing, no good deed goes unpunished, that people think that there's a motive behind it, and our only motive was this committee. There were 4 people on the committee I didn't even know, had never met, who were medical professionals and former nurse and EMS and so forth. So I'm very proud of how we put that together, and I don't regret it, and I think it was good, because I think it's similar to taking over the Conway Village Fire District. It's going to take 2 years to put this into motion, but at the end of the day, I think it will be the best service and the best savings. If you only care about savings, you're going to save, because we don't have to make a profit, we have to cover costs.
And you have a better service with a higher level. Anyway, so our time is up. John and Paul, I think it was very productive, and hopefully people watch this, and we went through the really interesting parts. It's pretty complicated stuff with the inspections and even Article 57. So, all right, guys, take care, and we'll see you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
John?